The day the Virakar arrived on Earth was one that no one would ever forget. For years, Earth's leaders had been preparing for this moment. An official meeting with the alien species who had watched over humanity from the shadows for centuries. The Virakar were famous across the galaxy, not only for their advanced technology, but also for their beauty and grace. They were said to be the most perfect beings in the universe. Their skin shimmered like silver, and their eyes glowed with the light of distant stars. No one had ever dared to speak of them in anything but awe. The Virakar arrived on Earth in a massive ship that hovered silently above the United Nations headquarters. It looked like a giant crystal, glowing softly in the sunlight. As the ship descended to land, Earth's leaders, ambassadors, and top scientists gathered in awe. The Virakar stepped out one by one, their long flowing robes and perfect, symmetrical features making them seem almost unreal. The crowd gasped as they saw them, but there was a strange tension in the air. No one knew how to react. Among the Virakar, one figure stood out. Alethara, the lead ambassador, was the most stunning of them all. Her hair, a pale silver, flowed around her like a curtain of light, and her violet eyes looked as if they could see straight into your soul. She moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. Every step she took was perfectly measured, her presence commanding attention. But despite her beauty, there was something cold about her, something that kept people at a distance. For most of the day, Earth's leaders spoke to the Virakar in formal, respectful tones, marveling at their technology and asking questions about their long history. But there was an unspoken rule among the humans: never make a Virakar feel uncomfortable. Never speak to them as if they were just like you. Everyone, even the most powerful leaders, kept their distance. No one dared to ask Alethara anything personal. No one dared to step out of line. That is, until Jake walked into the room. Jake was just an ordinary mechanic. He wasn't a diplomat or a scientist. He wasn't a part of any important government or military group. In fact, Jake wasn't even supposed to be there. He had been invited to the meeting by accident. Someone thought he was a technician, but instead of fixing anything, Jake ended up just standing in the back of the room, watching the event unfold. Jake didn't belong in this world of high-ranking officials and alien visitors, but he had never been good at following rules. He was curious about the Virakar. He had heard stories of their beauty and their power, but he had never imagined he would see them up close. When his eyes landed on Alethara, something inside him stirred. He had never seen anyone so beautiful, yet there was a sadness in her eyes, a loneliness that caught his attention. Without thinking, Jake stood up. His heart raced as he walked towards Alethara, pushing past the other humans who were too busy speaking to the other Virakar. His move was bold, reckless even. But Jake wasn't afraid. He had always been the kind of person who acted on instinct, even when it meant breaking the rules. He reached Alethara, who was speaking with a group of Earth's top leaders. They fell silent as Jake approached. For a moment, there was an uncomfortable stillness. No one had dared interrupt her before. Jake cleared his throat. Excuse me, miss. Would you maybe like to get dinner sometime?" The room went completely silent. The leaders stared at him, their eyes wide in disbelief. No one had expected this. Alethara herself paused, looking at Jake with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. It was the first time she had been approached by anyone without formalities, without fear. "You wish to ask me?" "Out." Alethara's voice was smooth, almost melodic, but there was a hint of surprise. Jake smiled nervously. "Yeah, I'm not really sure how things work with you, but I thought, maybe we could grab something to eat. You know, like normal people." The crowd held its breath. No one had ever dared to treat a Virakar like this before, and yet Jake had just done it so casually, so confidently. Alethara's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him. There was something different about this human, a strange kind of boldness that she had never seen. "Well," she said, her voice soft but tinged with amusement, I suppose we can arrange that. The room buzzed with whispers as Jake and Alethera exchanged a long look. Jake had no idea what he had just done. He was just a mechanic after all. But somehow, this one moment had changed everything. Jake could hardly believe it. He had actually asked an alien to dinner, and not just any alien. Alethera, the most beautiful and powerful of the Virakar. The one everyone else was too intimidated to even talk to. He wasn't sure what had come over him. But when he saw her standing there, looking so distant and untouchable, something inside him had snapped. It wasn't courage exactly. Maybe it was more like recklessness. But whatever it was, it had worked. Alethera had agreed to meet him. That night, Jake stood outside the Virakar embassy ship, staring up at the massive, gleaming structure. It wasn't like any building he had ever seen before. The ship was smooth, shaped like a giant crystal, glowing softly under the stars. It hovered silently, a silent testament to the power of the alien race. Jake felt a knot in his stomach. This wasn't his world. He was just a mechanic. What was he even doing here? But the thought of Alethera kept him going. The memory of her calm, yet curious gaze lingered in his mind. When he had asked her out, it was as though he had somehow broken through the cold walls of her perfect existence. He wasn't like the other humans. He wasn't trying to impress her with fancy words or gifts. He had simply seen something in her that made him believe she was more than just an alien. Maybe, deep down, she was lonely. Maybe, just maybe, she wanted someone who didn't treat her like she was perfect. Jake walked through the entrance of the embassy ship, where 2 Virakar guards stood at attention. They didn't look at him with any emotion. They didn't even acknowledge his presence. That was another thing about the Virakar. Everything about them was distant, almost cold. Their beauty, their intelligence, their power, they were like gods to the humans. But Jake wasn't afraid. He was led to a large dining hall, where Alethera was waiting. Her room was beautifully decorated, with strange, glowing plants and smooth metallic furniture. It looked nothing like the earthly restaurants Jake was used to. Everything here seemed perfect, almost unreal. But when Alethera stood up to greet him, all of that faded away. It was like the room itself was made to highlight her beauty. She was even more stunning in person, her silver hair flowing around her, and her violet eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made Jake's heart skip a beat. "You came," she said, her voice soft but steady. Jake smiled nervously, trying not to let his nervousness show. "Yeah, I said I would." Alethera didn't smile, but her eyes softened. She motioned for him to sit. "I must admit, I did not expect you to follow through. Most humans are too cautious when dealing with us." Jake shrugged, feeling out of place but oddly confident. "Well, I'm not most humans." They sat down at the table, and a strange silence filled the air. Alethera didn't speak right away. She studied Jake, her eyes scanning him as if trying to understand him. Jake felt like he was under a microscope, but he didn't mind. There was something about her that made him want to speak, to show her the side of humanity that wasn't afraid of perfection. He wanted her to see that humans weren't just weak or helpless. "So," Jake said, breaking the silence, "how's Earth been treating you? I mean, you've been here for a few days, right?" Alethera nodded, her expression serious. "The humans are kind, but I sense that they are fearful of us. They fear what they do not understand." Jake thought about that for a moment. He had never really been afraid of the Virakar. Sure, he had heard the stories and seen the documentaries about their advanced technology and powerful abilities, but he had never felt the kind of fear others seemed to. Maybe it was because he wasn't intimidated by beauty or power. "Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But not everyone fears you. Some people, they just don't know what to say. You know, how to act around someone like you." Alethera tilted her head, intrigued. "And how do you act?" Jake chuckled, feeling a bit more relaxed. "Like I'm sitting across from someone who's just another person. I'm not here to impress you. I'm just here to talk. For the first time, a small smile tugged at the corner of Alethura's lips. You are unlike anyone I have met. Jake smiled back, though he still felt a bit awkward. I've heard that before. As the meal progressed, their conversation deepened. They talked about Earth's history, about the different species in the galaxy, and even about their personal lives. Jake learned that Alethura's life had always been controlled, guided by the Virakar's ancient rules. She had never been allowed to make her own choices. It was always about maintaining perfection, about never showing weakness. For the first time, Jake began to understand that the Virakar weren't as perfect as they seemed. They had their own burdens, their own struggles, and maybe, just maybe, they were more like humans than anyone had realized. As the evening came to a close, Jake stood up to leave. Thanks for this, he said, feeling a strange connection with her. Alethura rose too, her eyes never leaving his. I was not expecting this. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I have been wrong about humans. Jake smiled again. Maybe you'll see us a little differently after tonight. As he walked away, he couldn't help but feel that, for the first time, he had truly connected with someone, not because of their beauty or power, but because of who they really were. Jake couldn't stop thinking about his dinner with Alethura. He had expected it to be awkward, maybe even uncomfortable, but it was the opposite. There was something different about her. Something real. She was more than just an alien, more than a perfect being. She was a person, just like him, with her own doubts and questions. After that night, Jake started to see Alethura in a new light. He didn't treat her like a distant, untouchable creature. He treated her like a person. And in return, she seemed to open up more and more. The next day, she invited him to meet her again. This time, she promised him something special. The invitation took Jake by surprise. He wasn't used to being invited by someone as important as Alethura. But he agreed without hesitation. He had never felt such a connection with anyone before, and he couldn't deny that he wanted to see her again. That evening, Jake stood at the entrance of the embassy ship, staring up at the massive structure. He felt like a small part of something huge, something far beyond his understanding. A part of him wondered if he was making a mistake, but another part of him was excited. He had been to fancy restaurants, yes, but this was different. This was with Alethura. When he stepped inside, a soft, warm light surrounded him. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were made of smooth, metallic surfaces that reflected the light in strange, beautiful patterns. The air was fresh, clean, almost like it had been filtered by the stars themselves. He followed a glowing path down a corridor until he reached the observation deck. The room was filled with soft, white light. Through the walls of transparent material, Jake could see the stars. It was as if they were floating in space, surrounded by the emptiness of the universe. There were no windows to look out of, only walls that let the stars shine through. Alethura was waiting for him. She was standing near the window, looking out at the endless space beyond. Her silver hair shimmered under the soft light, and her violet eyes seemed to glow even brighter in the dark. "You came," she said, her voice gentle but strong. "I wouldn't miss it," Jake replied, smiling. She turned to face him. "I wanted you to see this. It is a view most humans do not get to experience." Jake stepped forward, his eyes wide. "This is amazing. It's like being in space without actually leaving Earth." Alethura nodded, her expression softening. The Virakar have a deep connection with the stars. For us, they are more than just points of light. They are a guide, a symbol of what we strive to be, perfect, unchanging, and eternal. Jake looked out at the stars too. He couldn't help but feel small under their gaze. But at the same time, there was something comforting about it. The stars had been around long before humans, and they would be around long after. They were a reminder that there was always more to see, more to understand. "You know," Jake said slowly, "I've always wondered about the stars. I used to look at them when I was a kid and dream about what was out there. I never thought I'd get to see them like this. Eleuthera glanced at him, her eyes thoughtful. I know that feeling. For many of my people, the stars represent perfection. But I've come to understand that perfection is not all that matters. There is beauty in imperfection, in change. Jake smiled. That's a good way to look at it. I think humans have learned that over time. They stood there for a few moments, just looking out at the stars together. It was quiet, but the silence didn't feel uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Finally, Eleuthera turned to face Jake again. Tell me more about your world, Jake. About humans. Jake chuckled, his hands in his pockets. There's a lot to tell. We're not perfect, that's for sure, but we try. We fall down, and we get back up. We fight for what we believe in. We don't always get it right, but that's what makes us human. Eleuthera studied him, her gaze steady. You speak of humans with such passion. I did not expect this from someone like you. Jake shrugged. I'm not special, but I believe in people, in their potential. We're not perfect, but maybe that's what makes us strong. Eleuthera seemed to be considering his words carefully. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice soft. Perhaps I have been wrong about humans. There is strength in your spirit that I did not understand before. Jake smiled again. Maybe you'll get to see more of that, if you stick around. Eleuthera's eyes glimmered, and for the first time, she smiled. A small, genuine smile. It was the first time Jake had seen her truly smile, and it made him feel like he had done something right. He had shown her a side of humanity that was raw and real, and she seemed to appreciate it. The night stretched on, and the stars outside twinkled as if they were sharing in their moment. For Jake and Eleuthera, it was a night neither of them would forget. Two beings from different worlds, connected by something simple, understanding. The days that followed Jake's second meeting with Eleuthera felt like a dream. They continued to meet in private, sharing more time together. Jake had never felt more alive. It wasn't just because Eleuthera was an alien, or because of her beauty. It was because of the way she made him feel, like he was worth listening to, like his thoughts and feelings mattered. Eleuthera, too, seemed to be changing. The cold, distant demeanor she had once shown the humans had softened around Jake. She began to ask him more personal questions, to learn about Earth, about humanity. It was clear that she was trying to understand what it meant to be human, something she had never done before. And Jake was eager to share, eager to show her the side of humanity that wasn't about war or fear, but about hope and connection. One evening, as they sat together on the observation deck, staring out at the stars, Eleuthera's expression grew serious. Jake, she said quietly, there is something I need to tell you, something I have not shared with anyone, not even my people. Jake looked at her, his heart racing. He had never seen her look so serious before. What is it? You can tell me. Eleuthera took a deep breath and turned to face him fully. The Vairakar are not just a peaceful race of perfect beings. We have a dark secret, a secret that could destroy us all. Jake's mind raced. He didn't know what to say. Eleuthera, the most powerful and perfect being he had ever met, was telling him that her people had a secret, a dangerous one. What kind of secret? He asked softly, afraid of what she might reveal. Eleuthera hesitated for a moment, her violet eyes looking distant. Long ago, when the Vairakar first emerged as the dominant race in the galaxy, we discovered something that could give us even more power, unlimited power. But it came at a cost, a terrible cost. Jake leaned forward, unable to look away. What was it? Eleuthera's voice faltered slightly. We discovered how to manipulate time and space itself. We found a way to travel between dimensions, to reach other realities. But it was unstable. The power was so immense, so dangerous, that we had to seal it away. We built a device to keep it contained. Jake's mind spun. You mean Your people can travel between worlds. Alithara nodded. Yes, but we do not use it. We do not speak of it. The device that contains the power is buried deep within our ships, hidden from even our own people. We cannot let it fall into the wrong hands. If it were ever released, it would change the fabric of the universe itself. Jake stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. That's incredible. And dangerous. Alithara nodded again. Yes, and now there are others, other races, who know about the device. They are trying to find it, to unlock its power. If that happens, the balance of the galaxy will be destroyed. The Virakar will be forced to either defend it, or risk losing everything. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying there are people who want to steal this power, to use it for themselves? Alithara's expression hardened. Yes, and the worst part is, they are closer than we realized. The Virakar are being hunted, and I am one of the targets. Jake's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Why are they after you? I am the one who knows where the device is hidden, Alithara explained. I have been assigned to keep it protected, to make sure it never falls into the wrong hands. But now, I fear that I have made a mistake. My visits to Earth, my time with you, they have made me a target. There are those who will stop at nothing to find me, to find the device. Jake could hardly believe what he was hearing. The woman he had been getting to know, the alien who had seemed so untouchable, was in danger. He didn't know what to say or how to help. He had no experience with anything like this, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let anything happen to her. Alithara, Jake said, his voice steady but full of emotion. You're not alone in this. I don't care what kind of danger you're in. I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes. Alithara's eyes softened. You would do this for me, for someone like me. Jake nodded firmly. You've trusted me, Alithara. You've opened up to me. I'm not going to just stand by and let you fight this battle alone. For the first time, Alithara smiled. A genuine, warm smile. It was the kind of smile that made Jake's heart feel lighter. Thank you, Jake. I do not deserve your kindness, but I am grateful for it. As they stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the stars, Jake knew that their lives were about to change forever. The universe was a much bigger place than he had ever imagined, and the danger was real. But he was ready to stand by Alithara. No matter what came next, he wasn't going to let her face it alone. The moment the cloaking shield activated, the pod fell into a heavy silence. For a brief moment, it felt like they were invisible, hidden from the dangerous hunters in pursuit. Jake couldn't shake the feeling of tension, though. Even though Alithara had managed to hide them, the danger was still very real. They couldn't outrun the hunters forever. Alithara's face was set in concentration as she worked the controls. We have a few minutes before they can track us again, she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. We need to reach the Virakar ship. It's our only chance. Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the small window. The stars outside were blurred, streaking by as the pod shot through space. He felt like they were trapped in a race against time, with every second that passed bringing the hunters closer. The hum of the pod's engines was the only sound, but it did nothing to calm his nerves. Do you think they'll find us? Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Alithara didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the controls, her hands moving quickly as she adjusted the pod's course. They are skilled hunters, she said, her voice calm despite the situation. They will not give up easily, but I know the way. I know the ship's location, and I know the route we must take. Jake looked at her, a small sense of comfort growing in his chest. You're not alone in this, he said. I'm with you. She glanced at him, and for a brief moment, her face softened. I know, Jake. I am grateful. I never expected you to care so much. He shrugged, his heart beating faster. It's the right thing to do. As they continued their journey through the asteroid field, Jake couldn't help but wonder what would happen if they were caught. What if they didn't make it? The risks felt higher now, the weight of what they were carrying heavier. The fate of the galaxy was in their hands, and he had never felt so small. But Alethera had given him something he hadn't expected: hope. She believed they could do this. And that belief, in turn, made Jake believe they could succeed. The ship rocked again, this time with a sharper jolt. Jake's heart skipped a beat. "They found us," Alethera said, her voice tight with focus. "We need to make a break for it. Hold on." Without another word, she pulled the lever to accelerate, and the pod shot forward at a blistering speed. Jake gripped the edge of his seat as the stars outside turned into a blur. The pod swerved and dodged asteroids, making sharp turns as Alethera piloted it with skill and precision. Jake's stomach flipped as they narrowly avoided hitting a massive rock. "Don't slow down," Jake urged, his voice rising in the chaos. "I won't," Alethera said, her expression hardening. "We have to stay ahead of them." Through the shaking of the pod, Jake saw them, the hunters' ships, dark and sleek, following close behind. They had clearly locked onto the pod's energy trail, and no matter how fast Alethera flew, they wouldn't let them escape easily. "I'm activating the final shield," Alethera said, a touch of desperation in her voice. "It should be enough to hold them off for a while." The pod shook once more as a faint energy barrier surrounded them. Jake felt a strange, tingling sensation as the shield powered up. He glanced out the window again, watching as the hunters' ships closed in. One of them fired a shot, and Jake could hear the blast impact the shield. The whole pod shuddered, but the shield held. Alethera's voice was steady but urgent. "We're close. Just a few more minutes." Jake tried to stay calm, but the pressure was mounting. The hunters were right on their tail, and every second felt like an eternity. He had never been in a life-or-death situation before, and the weight of what they were facing hit him hard. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. Alethera glanced at the display and her eyes narrowed. "We're almost there. I'm initiating a final course change. Brace yourself." With a sudden jolt, the pod banked sharply to the right, diving into a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. The hunters followed, but their ships were too large to navigate the narrow space as easily as the pod. The sound of their engines roared behind them, but the gap was getting smaller. Jake held his breath as they sped forward, the walls of rock looming ever closer. The next few moments were a blur. Alethera expertly steered the pod through the winding asteroid field, her hands moving quickly across the controls. Every twist and turn felt like a near miss, but somehow they kept going, staying ahead of the hunters. Jake didn't know how she did it, but he knew they didn't have much time left. Finally, Alethera spoke again, her voice barely audible over the noise. "We're close to the ship. Prepare yourself." As they emerged from the asteroid field, Jake caught his first glimpse of the Viracar ship. It was massive, floating in the distance like a ghost in the vastness of space. Its sleek, metallic surface shimmered in the light of distant stars, and it seemed to glow with an otherworldly energy. Alethera let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "We made it." Jake exhaled, his body relaxing for the first time in what felt like hours. But he knew this was only the beginning. The hunters weren't far behind, and the real battle was still ahead. The moment the pod docked with the Viracar ship, Jake felt a weight lift off his shoulders. They had made it to safety for now. But he knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The hunters were still out there, closing in, and the device that could destroy everything was hidden deep within the ship. "Come on," Alethera said, her voice firm. "We don't have much time. We need to get to the control center. The device must be secured before they find us." Jake nodded, trying to steady his racing heart. They had only just arrived, but already the urgency of their mission was clear. The ship around them was cold, sleek, and strange. It felt alien, and yet Jake couldn't help but marvel at its advanced design. He had never seen anything like it on Earth. Alethera led the way, her steps quick and purposeful. Jake followed closely behind, doing his best to keep up. He could see the determination in her eyes, the same determination that had driven her to reveal the truth about the Vairakar and the dangerous power they had locked away. She wasn't just protecting herself, she was protecting everything. As they moved through the ship's long corridors, Jake's mind raced. The hunters were coming. He had no idea how far behind they were or how many there were, but he knew they couldn't let their guard down. Every corner, every shadow, could hide an enemy. Finally, they reached a large, circular room at the center of the ship. Alethera stood in front of a massive control panel, her fingers hovering over the glowing keys. The room was silent, save for the low hum of the ship's systems. "This is it," Alethera said quietly, her voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "The device is just beyond this door, but I can't open it alone. I need your help." Jake stepped forward, ready to do whatever it took. "What do I need to do?" Alethera's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "We need to input the code together. Only two beings can unlock it, one from the Vairakar and one from outside our race. That's where you come in. Together, we can make sure the device stays locked." Jake didn't hesitate. He had no idea what the code was or how the device worked, but he trusted Alethera. She had trusted him, and now he was going to do the same. As they entered the code, the room around them began to vibrate. The walls shimmered, and the ground beneath their feet felt like it was shifting. Jake could feel the power of the device just beyond the door. It was overwhelming, like standing on the edge of something immense and dangerous. Suddenly, the door slid open, revealing a glowing chamber filled with light. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it sat the device, a sleek, black object that seemed to hum with an energy all its own. Jake stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the low hum of the device. He could feel its power radiating off it, like nothing he had ever experienced. "This is it," Alethera whispered, "the device that could change everything." Before Jake could respond, the room was suddenly filled with the sound of footsteps. The hunters had found them. Jake spun around, instinctively stepping in front of Alethera. He didn't know what kind of weapons the hunters had, but he knew they were outnumbered. The door to the chamber slammed shut, trapping them inside. Alethera's voice was calm, but filled with urgency. "We have to secure the device. If it falls into their hands, everything is lost." The door to the chamber hissed open again, and a group of shadowy figures stepped inside. Their weapons gleamed in the dim light, and their eyes were cold and calculating. They had found them, and they weren't going to let them escape. "We've been searching for this device for a long time," one of the hunters said, his voice low and menacing. "And now, we finally found it." Jake's mind raced. He had no weapons, no combat training, but he wouldn't let them take the device. He couldn't. "I won't let you take it," Jake said, his voice surprisingly steady. He didn't know where the courage came from, but it was there. He would protect this device, and he would protect Alethera. Alethera stepped forward, her expression hard. "You cannot take what you do not understand. The power inside this device is too great, too dangerous." The hunters laughed. "We understand enough to know that we want it, and we'll do whatever it takes to get it." With that, they raised their weapons, ready to attack. But before anyone could move, Alethera's hand shot out, a surge of energy blasting from her fingertips. The room was filled with a blinding light as the hunters staggered back, shocked by the force of the blast. Jake's heart raced as he saw Alethera's power in action. She wasn't just a fighter, she was a force to be reckoned with. But even she couldn't fight them all. The hunters regrouped, but they hesitated now. They were no longer certain of their victory. The power of the device was too much for any one of them to control. Jake took a deep breath and turned to Alethera. "We need to destroy it," he said, "before they can get it." Alethera nodded, and together They worked quickly to deactivate the device, but even as they did, the hunters lunged forward, determined to stop them. The final battle for the galaxy had begun. Jake couldn't believe how fast things were moving. Just days ago, he had been sitting in a small restaurant on Earth, awkwardly trying to impress Alethara, an alien. Now he was standing by her side, knowing that the fate of the galaxy was at risk. And he had no idea what to do next. They couldn't just ignore the danger. Alethara had made it clear. The device that could control time and space was too powerful, and others were searching for it. That meant Alethara wasn't just in danger. So was the entire universe. "We need to move quickly," Alethara said, her voice serious. She had been pacing back and forth on the observation deck, her mind clearly racing. "The hunters are closing in. We can't stay here much longer." Jake nodded, feeling his heart pound in his chest. "So what's the plan? How do we stop them?" Alethara paused, turning to face him. "The device is hidden deep inside the HFY ship. Only a few people know where it is, and I'm one of them. But the hunters, they'd found a way to track me. They won't stop until they have what they want." Jake felt a mix of fear and determination. He knew he couldn't let Alethara face this danger alone. "We have to stop them. We can't let them get their hands on the device." She gave him a long, searching look. "I never expected someone like you to stand by me, Jake. You are braver than most." Jake swallowed hard. "I'm just doing what's right." The truth was, he didn't know what would happen next. He was a mechanic, a simple guy from Earth. He had no experience with galactic politics or dangerous alien hunters. But for Alethara, he would do whatever it took. Alethara walked to a small panel on the wall and pressed a few buttons. A hidden door slid open, revealing a sleek, metallic transport pod. "This will take us to the HFY ship," she explained. "It's well hidden, but I believe we can get there before the hunters catch up." Jake followed her, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He was about to travel across space in an alien ship, trying to protect a weapon that could destroy the universe. His whole life had just been turned upside down. As they settled into the pod, Jake glanced over at Alethara. She was focused, her face set with determination. She looked every bit the powerful HFY warrior, but there was a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. For the first time, Jake could see the weight of her responsibilities. She wasn't just a beautiful alien. She was someone who carried the burden of the universe on her shoulders. "Alethara," Jake said softly, "are you sure we're doing the right thing? I mean, the stakes are enormous. If we fail, the whole galaxy could change forever." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked out at the stars outside, her face pensive. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but I know I can't let this power fall into the wrong hands. The HFY are not perfect. We have made mistakes in the past, and I fear that if we let this happen, we will only make more. I don't want to be responsible for that." Jake could see how much it hurt her to carry that responsibility. She wasn't just a warrior or a leader. She was someone who genuinely cared about the future of the galaxy. They spent hours in silence as the pod sped through space. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light as they traveled faster than Jake had ever imagined possible. The hum of the engines was the only sound, and for a while, it felt like they were the only two people in the universe. Suddenly, the calm was shattered by an alarm. The pod shook, and a loud warning light flashed. "We've been detected," Alethara said, her voice calm but urgent. "They're here." Jake's heart raced. He didn't know what to do. The HFY ship was ahead, hidden deep in a distant asteroid field. But now, the hunters were closing in on them. They couldn't outrun them, not with the pod they were using. The hunters had faster ships, more advanced technology. "What do we do?" Jake asked, panic creeping into his voice. Alethara's hands flew over the controls. "We need to make sure they don't follow us to the HFY ship. I'll activate a cloaking shield to hide us." As she worked, Jake could hear the sounds of the hunters' ships coming closer. Their energy blasts could be felt in the vibrations of the pod. Alethera's fingers moved quickly, her face focused. She wasn't just fighting for her own survival. She was fighting for everyone in the galaxy. A loud thud shook the pod, and Jake's stomach lurched. They had been hit. He braced himself, unsure of what would happen next. Alethera's voice broke through the chaos. "We're cloaked now. We just have to stay ahead of them long enough to reach the ship." Jake gritted his teeth. "Let's do this." They had one chance. The hunters were closing in, but Alethera was determined. Together, they would find the Vira ship. Together, they would protect the galaxy from the dangerous power that threatened it. But the chase was just beginning.